Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's so many levels of artistry in this business. It's hard to keep track of them all, and that's what we're here for. But if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects to the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. You know, if you like how we do things around here, I am going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because quite frankly, you're listening right now. And if you are listening, keep listening and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button for the podcast because well, we appreciate it. We're available everywhere. We're on all the major podcast platforms like Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So everywhere, give us that old like, subscribe, give us a little 5-star rating on your service of choice. Also, we're available on social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Letterboxd, TikTok, all sorts of fun stuff for all kinds of good updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film and television, basically the moving image at large, because if we live to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we enjoy it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So do us that kindness. Come on by and pay us a visit. On this episode, you guessed it, we're back onto the Apple TV Plus, but with Masters of the Air, yet another fantastic show about the airmen fighting in World War II. Another great show from those minds. It's a lot of the same people who did Band of Brothers and The Pacific and all that stuff. It's really a great piece of television, but we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with a bit of an icon of the industry, someone who makes costumes. She's a costume designer, but she's one of the best in the business, the one like Colleen Atwood, and we talked with her about sort of working on the project, the minutia of the job, and so on and so forth, and just sort of picking her brain on what it takes to I guess maybe be noticed but not be noticed, especially when you're designing costumes and really trying to sort of give it everything a very specific flair and style, even when it's one of those things that I've always appreciated costume design, and getting to pick her brain was a real pleasure. But like I said, go check out Master of the Air, which is on Apple TV Plus now. But first, enjoy our talk with Colleen Atwood, a multi-time Academy Award winner for costume design. Thank you very much. Because it's a darn good one. I enjoyed the hell out of this one. All right.
Yeah, I've done this and not pressed the button, so those are bad days. I always got to do that first. But Colleen, obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today. And I mean, congrats on the show.
Thank you. It was a wonderful experience.
Now, I mean, I guess my first question is, especially on something like this, I'm always curious about, like, I guess what stage of the process you get brought into something. Because, I mean, particularly for something like this, because it's not like you're designing fanciful costumes. It's based on real life. Like, what stage do they start bringing you in to really start defining, I guess, the look and the style for all these people?
Well, I was brought in early on, like 9 months out, because we needed to make the costumes that the guys were going to wear. The leathers didn't exist in the world. There were samples, but there wasn't something people could actually wear for a whole movie. So we had to create the flight suits, all the leather flight gear, the bombardiers outfits, source the masks, source, the hats. I mean, it was a big job of just compiling all the pieces that all these uniforms, are made up of, which is stuff we just look at and don't think about, but finding all the rank, finding all the shoes, finding all the socks, finding all the, underwear for when there were underwear scenes. It's just a continual list of stuff, checking out, finding out what we had to match. I mean, what we had to make and what we had to buy from reproduction houses. Some stuff we rented, especially the dress uniforms for the U.S. soldiers. A lot of those were authentic ones I rented here in the States that still exist, which is pretty great because they were so beautiful. And then we had all the foreign armies as well that were involved, the Russians, the Germans. So reaching out to the houses that I know in Europe that tend to have the more Eastern costumes, seeing what they had to figure out what we had to manufacture in that arena as well.
That's absolutely wild. That's something I never even really thought of initially. I can imagine, especially for a period piece, there's going to be stuff you're going to have to build from scratch. I mean, how big of a role does stuff like research play in something like this to be able to at least be able to get a half decent look at some of these things?
Well, the thing that was really great is two things. There is a certain amount of authentic stuff left,
Yeah,
not tons, and people treasure it and deal it and collect it. So we were able to compile, samples of everything. And there's people that are invested in reproducing it, some of them better than others. I was able to find some original fabric at Eastern Costume in LA. The guy just had a roll of fabric that was, from the period, which is really awesome. But a couple houses in the UK still make military type fabric. So I was able to get them to do it in the nice kind of quality wools and stuff that the clothing was in the time period. And, strangely, like some of the flight suits I had made in Japan, because they were really into them and they had the right hardware, they had it all replicated. So it was all over the place, the people that embrace it and sort of love the sort of the history and the quality of the clothing.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, I'm curious, how closely do you get to work with the actors, especially on something like this? Because obviously these are military uniforms and there's a certain degree of, you don't have a lot of room for wiggle, but at the same time, these are each individual guys. I can imagine there's going to be a little bit of flair for each one so they can help to stand out.
Well, the pilots especially had a lot of license, I think, in the flair department. They were kind of heroic looking guys, and they had added scarves, the way they dressed, they added pieces. And once they were over here in the war, some of them, officers especially, had things made for them, even on Savile Row and stuff. The really high ranking officers did. The way with uniforms, as have a lot of regulation on how they're worn.
For sure.
But I think when people actually get into the field with them, they respect it, but they also use it in more different ways. And it has to sort of survive. They have them for a long time. They don't get a new outfit every week when it's dirty. They keep wearing the same one, clean it up. Maybe they get a couple, So it gets worn, it has different characteristics. Guys mended their clothes. There was a lot of personalization to the clothing within the parameters of history. And we had really great photo research. From, the 100th, they had a lot of historical photographs, but also the museum at Thorpe Abbott's, the little museum there had files and files of photographs of, not just the high up guys, but the guys around there, the local guys that were helping. So we really had a rich palette to draw from. And when you start seeing that stuff, the real pictures, you realize that for sure they wore their uniforms, but there might be a day or two where they weren't actually wearing them in the regulated sort of way,
No, I mean, I'm curious, how does the job change for you, especially from project to project? Because I mean, well, there's obviously going to be similarities. Masters of Air will be different from Little Mermaid, which will be different from Fantastic Beasts, which will be different from Sweeney Todd, and kind of so on and so on. What are the different nuances of how the job changes from project to project?
Well, the visualization in all those jobs, no matter what, I start with a sort of historical base that the story is set in, even if it's a fantasy. Whether it's a historical base that the production's made up of, in Little Mermaid of 1830s, somewhere out there in the ocean sort of thing. There's sort of a reference and starting point. And I base that in that research, and then I move out from that fantasy piece like that and create stuff, but I take the silhouettes and the things from that era to create it. In the example of all of them, really, the way that I run my department is kind of like a military operation. Because if you aren't organized, and the scale of all those jobs is pretty big, Masters of the Air being the most gigantic. But if you don't run your department in a certain way, like that everybody knows their job, there's a certain thing to do every day, there's a certain amount of money you have to spend, there's a certain amount of stuff that has to happen to the costumes. The movie never looks as good or runs as well. So I have a lot of, I don't have a lot of assistants. I usually have one or two assistants. And then I have someone that supervises the show, which means between us, we figure out who's where, when, and what they're doing. And they also run the numbers for the show. So they keep track of the budget and the labor, because it is a business. I mean, I don't think a costume designer working today would have success if they didn't have a level of organization and people supporting them behind them that made it all happen. While you have the ideas, you can't actually go out and do every idea that you have. You have people you send out, see what you can find here, see what you can find there. And that's how you arrive at your goal.
For sure, for sure. Now, I mean, how has the job evolved? Because I mean, you've been doing this since what, approximately like the mid '80s, if I'm right. I can imagine there's some variations to sort of what makes up the day-to-day job of being in costume design.
Well, it's, different jobs require different things of costume designers, but basically the rules are the same. You design clothes for actors, you create character with each actor. You talk to them about their character. You collaborate with a director and get the director's vision of the script. And then you take it from there. So in that way, I think the job of a costume designer hasn't changed a lot. The way films are made has changed a lot because of visual effects and the scale of films, that are happening now. Although I feel like we're sort of heading back to a middle ground from a kind of a extreme ground of vis effects and just scale of filmmaking for the sake of scale. But it is really the job itself and what you want to accomplish as a good designer have kind of stayed the same in a sense.
Well, I mean, that's good. I mean, just as a fan, I don't think any of us want to have your job devolve into sort of being a suit of ping pong balls that someone has to wear and then have something matted on top of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so far so good.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, I'm curious, especially on this, on a project like this, but obviously the job in general. Where does the creative payoff come for you? Is it on jobs like this where it's going to be down to the detail and the nuance, the little things like the sewn up uniform or the wear and tear, or does it come with sort of the flair or sort of the bigger jobs that you get to do? Because every time I talk to someone in the industry, it's either people get joy out of the moments people notice and the ones that people don't notice.
Well, a lot isn't noticed in film, especially in design, the big stuff's the obvious stuff. What I like is when you're in the room with the actor and you sort of like, you're doing all this stuff and you both suddenly look at it and you're like really happy in that moment with what who the person becomes in front of you. To me, that's the biggest kind of joy of my job. And then seeing the work kind of play out and evolve is also really rewarding. Like Masters of the Air was, 9 hours of
Sure, yeah.
of work, 9 hours. And each episode was different people coming in doing different things. And then you'd go back to the others. But we had, we went from the beginning of the war to the camps at the end. And just the scope and the sort of planning and the sort of beauty of all that when it came together for me when I saw it the first time. I was just like, I don't even know how we did it. It was such an kind of kind of bond that all of us had,
Love
the
it.
department and the actors. It was really a nice process.
Well, there's such joy when you get to see the detail and the care that goes into something like this, and it comes through on so many different levels. But I mean, just to start putting a bow on this, I'm kind of curious because I mean, as we did reference a little bit earlier, like you've been working pretty steady since like the mid '80s. Like I'm dying to know, like what got your foot into the door of Hollywood and sort of working in this industry because it's rare to have a career that you've had.
Well, I think, I have a very quirky entree into the film business. I had a kid when I was in high school and didn't, go to college and all the normal process that a lot of costume designers do, study theater. But I got an art scholarship, so I studied art, and I wanted to be a painter, but I had to make a living, and I wasn't that great a painter. And so I started working in fashion. And I worked in fashion until my daughter was around 15. And I was still young. And I was like, I want to work on movies. And I didn't know doing what. And I went to New York to take this course at NYU Film School, which I moved to New York with literally with $500 in my pocket, um, and a big dream. And the film school thing didn't exactly pay out. I didn't get in, and then I got in and hated it because I was so much older than everybody else, and it was kind of, it was kind of weird. But I met people there, and then by chance, I met someone on the street corner through a friend of mine from Seattle, which is where I came from, whose mom was a production designer, and she was doing Ragtime, one of the first women production designers, I might add. And they needed I said, oh, I'll do anything, I'll work for free. I was doing like odd jobs. I said, I'll work for free, anything just to, learn. And the first day they were supposed to shoot, I got a phone call at the apartment I was staying at, and somebody hadn't shown up for work in the art department. So I got my first job. Well, thank God it was by a phone, because it wasn't cell phones or beepers even back then. And I went in and I worked for Patrizia von Brandenstein for that show, and then for a couple others. And then she recommended me for things, and it sort of mushroomed that way. But my background had been working in all kinds of jobs with real people, which helps you understand real character.
Sure.
B, an art background, and C, a fashion background. So it was sort of a Zen moment when it really finally happened. And like all careers in film, it takes a few years to actually, not, you have a lot of dry spells in
For
between
sure.
jobs, and, there's a lot of waiting period, and it's very hard to hang in there. But I was lucky that, I had so many friends in New York that really, oh, hey, I need, something here and something there. So I just did dance. I did whatever I could. And then I met Michael Apted and got my first job on a movie with him, which was great. And then my second job was with Michael Mann, the Michaels, which couldn't be more different. And then I met Jonathan Demme and did, several films with him. So it kind of, I built people and friendships and relationships as a designer with directors that I still treasure to this day.
Well, and I mean, it's a testament too to just working the room and talking to people and just, branching out that way. I mean, it's something that gets a little lost sometimes, but obviously, Colleen, just, congrats again on your work on the show, which I thought was great. But I mean, just congrats in general. And I mean, thank you again so much for the time today.
Thank
I've
you.
been an appreciator of yours for quite some time, and I really appreciated this.
Well, it's nice meeting you. Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
All
All right. Bye, everyone.
right. Bye.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.